Hello everyone and welcome to this exchange webinar. The title of today's exchange webinar is the only certification in the world of waste reduction and will last approximately an hour. Thank you for registering, and thanks also to today's speakers. We have Lazar from the Carbon Trust and we also have Rick attending from Coleg, Cambria. Thank you again for registering. My name's Emma and I am the Member Events and Communities Officer here at the EAUC. As you know, the EAUC deliver, develop and administrate the Sustainability Exchange, which aims to be the world's leading resource of sustainability information. And you can search for these resources at www.sustainabilityexchange.ac.uk. So what are exchanges? Exchanges are free lunchtime webinars on a range of sustainability topics. Anyone can present them, so if you'd like to, just get in touch with us at sustainabilityexchange@eauc.org.uk or myself. So there's just a little bit of housekeeping to go over now. I'm hoping that everybody can hear me okay. I have muted you all when you came in just to avoid any background noise so that you can hear as clearly as possible throughout the webinar. If you do have any issues hearing at any point during this exchange, please use the chat box in the bottom right-hand corner just to send me a message saying so, and I'll try my best to figure it out. Hopefully most of you have working microphones or you've dialed in using a phone. Don't worry if you don't, as you will still have the chance to ask any questions at the end by typing them to me in the chat box or to any of our speakers, or there is the option to send them to everybody, and I will happily read them aloud to make sure that your question is answered today. This webinar is being recorded so that you can view it again or share it with colleagues. It will be made available on the Sustainability Exchange with the presentation and any other resources later on today. And I'll send you a link to view those. You will also be sent a short survey later today just to gain any feedback. Please do take time to complete this because it helps us to improve our CPD and events for you, our members. Okay, so that's all from me now. Thank you, and I will happily pass over to Lazar.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lazar Armianov. I work at the Carbon Trust. I am the Senior Client Manager of the business unit of the Carbon Trust called the Carbon Trust Certification. It's lovely to have you all here this afternoon. I have a few slides to share with you, a presentation really on the Carbon Trust standard for waste. My bits of the presentation should last between 20 and 25 minutes, and hopefully I can answer some of your questions at the very end. What I will start with today is I'll start off by giving you a bit of an introduction to the Carbon Trust, who we are and what we do. Then move on to tell you a little bit more about the business unit that I work for, which is the Carbon Trust Certification. And then go on to give you an introduction to the Carbon Trust Standard for Waste, what it is, how you can achieve it, and what the benefits of certification actually are. At the very end, I will be joined by one of our standard bearers from Coleg, Cambria, Rick, who will tell you about their experience with the Carbon Trust, with certification, the actual assessment, and what benefits they saw from the certification. I'll start off then with a few words on the Carbon Trust itself. Probably a lot of you are aware of the Carbon Trust, or you may have actually worked with us in the past. The Carbon Trust has been around for about 14 years now. It was formed all the way back in 2001 by the UK government, and for the first sort of 6-7 years of its existence, it was fully funded by the UK government. We're a mission-driven organization, and our mission is really to accelerate the move to a sustainable, low-carbon economy. So we work with all types of organizations in the public and the private sector to work on that mission, to help them become more sustainable, to help them become more efficient and reduce their environmental impacts. We are a not-for-profit organization, and although we were fully government-funded up until 2009-10, we are now a self-sufficient organization. We do remain not-for-profit, but all of our services, most of our services really are work on sort of contracts and are paid for. All of the profits that we do make as an organization do get invested back into this mission into helping companies reduce their environmental impact. How do we do that, though? There's three ways, really. One, we help them, we help businesses, we help the public sector and the private sector through advice. We advise governments, we advise companies, but also universities, NHS trusts, on how to become more sustainable. What are the opportunities in the world economy, and how do we move to a more sort of low carbon world? The second thing that we do is that we help organizations certify or verify the claims that they are making about how they have reduced their environmental impact. So we help companies measure and certify those claims. We act as an independent third party that will come into your organization, check the things that you are claiming, so that when you do claim them, you put them in your annual reports, or you put them out there through press releases, that there is somebody actually behind you backing you up. The third way that we help organizations, but also the public sector, in moving to a lower carbon economy, is that we help organizations develop and actually deploy low carbon technologies and solutions. That's usually where there is a market failure, so we try to invest time, sometimes even money, into new technologies that can help move to a lower carbon economy. That's a little bit about the Carbon Trust. Where do we sit in then, the Carbon Trust certification team, and what is it that we actually do? So the Carbon Trust certification team works, as I said before, with organizations to help them measure and demonstrate improvements in their environmental performance. How do we do that, and why have we started on this journey? Well, really, it was back in 2008 when a lot of Carbon Trust members, or a lot of personnel from the Carbon Trust, was having conversations with different teams within the public and the private sector, sustainability teams, environment teams. And what we heard back then is that a lot of these organizations felt a little bit of a frustration in that they were doing the right things in terms of the environment, but when it came to communicating these, it was difficult to do so. Very often some were accused of greenwash, so they needed some sort of independent body to come and verify the claims that they were making before those were actually sent out. So that's where the Carbon Trust Certification Company was formed, and that is how the first Carbon Trust standard, the one for carbon, was put in place, to really verify claims about carbon reductions, energy efficiency. Over those years, since 2008, we've moved from carbon to cover water and to cover waste. And the reason we've done this is, as you can see on this slide, is because there's actually a lot of efficiency to be gained. It's not just the reputational benefit that the companies are looking for, but also some bottom line benefits that you can get from reducing your environmental impacts from carbon, water, and waste. And here are just a few examples done, that I've taken from Carbon Trust research, but also research done by RAP and other bodies that look at what is the actual cost of a ton of carbon, or whether it's produced from electricity, from diesel, what's the actual cost of 1 cubic meter of water to heat it, to pump it, to cool it, and what's the actual cost of a ton of waste. Any reductions in waste, water, or carbon often lead to bottom line benefits as well. So the Carbon Trust Certification Company, and more specifically the Carbon Trust Standard, or standards. Today we will specifically talk about the Carbon Trust Standard for waste, but as I said before, this journey began back in 2008 when we started off by developing a standard for carbon. So a standard that looked at measuring, managing, and reducing carbon within an organization. All of the Carbon Trust standards are based on this premise. We ask organizations to demonstrate to us that they are measuring accurately an environmental impact, that they are managing that environmental impact, and ultimately that they are reducing that. Our standards are about outcomes rather than process. You may have all the best processes in the world, but if you're not doing anything about, if you're not using these processes correctly, you won't be reducing, and ultimately you won't be helping the environment. So in order for an organization to actually achieve one of the Carbon Trust standards, carbon, water, or waste, it needs to demonstrate that they are measuring, managing, and reducing that environmental impact. If you demonstrate these three things to us, to the Carbon Trust Certification Company, we will certify your organization to the standard for carbon, water, or for waste. As I said, today we will be talking specifically about the Carbon Trust Standard for waste. This is the most recent of the Carbon Trust Standards. It was launched back in the beginning of 2014, and we currently have just over, I think it's about 30 organizations that are certified to the Carbon Trust Standard for waste. Those organizations are both in the public and the private sector, and we will have later on Coleg Cambria talk about their certification to the Carbon Trust Standard for waste. They were the first in the higher education sector to achieve this standard. The Carbon Trust Standard for waste, as the other two standards, again, is about demonstrating that you're measuring accurately your waste tonnage figures, how do you dispose of waste, what sort of different types of waste you have, that you demonstrate that you're also managing that waste. So do you have a specific policy on waste? Do you have your own targets? Is there a specific team within your organization that is managing waste? What is it that you work with your waste suppliers on, etc.? And ultimately that you are reducing the total tonnage of waste, either on an absolute basis or relative to an output metric. But I will come back to that a little later on. If you demonstrate, again, these three things to us, you will certify you to the Carbon Trust Standard for waste, and you will have the opportunity to use the Carbon Trust Standard logo and to promote your achievement through us or with our help. What you see here on this slide on the left is that Carbon Trust Standard logo. This is the logo for what we call our triple certification, so the logo that you would get to use if you certify to waste, carbon, and water. What you see on this next slide is again, the logo of the Carbon Trust Standard, but that is specific to waste. So coming back then to the Carbon Trust Standard for waste and when it was launched. It was launched again in January 2014, and it was the first organizational waste reduction certification out there. We spoke to a lot of different organizations here in the UK to get endorsements from them and to check that what we were developing met the requirements of these organizations, but also of potential customers that we would have. So during the 6 months prior to the launch, we actually spoke to the Department for Energy and Climate Change. We also spoke to DEFRA, to the EAUC, the Environment Agency, and RAP, just to make sure that the methodology we were developing was indeed in line with what these organizations were working on in terms of waste. So what does the Carbon Trust Standard for waste actually cover? All of the Carbon Trust Standards, as I said before, work on the same premise. But as you go through an assessment towards a standard or towards certification, there are really two areas that we ask you to demonstrate your performance in. There is a qualitative part to the assessment and a quantitative part. On the quantitative side, what does the actual Carbon Trust waste standard cover? What do we consider waste? What are we going to be assessing you on? What numbers are we looking for you to demonstrate? Well, as you see on this slide, the Carbon Trust Standard for waste includes all forms of hazardous and solid waste. Basically, all types of waste that would be taken away from your organization by a waste contractor. What the standard for waste does not cover is gaseous waste and liquid effluent. And the reason it doesn't cover these is because they're actually covered for the most part by the Carbon Trust Standard for carbon and also the Carbon Trust Standard for water. What is it that we actually ask you to measure then? Well, we ask you to measure total tonnage of waste. We have sort of a preference of the type of data that we ask you to submit to the Carbon Trust certification team to be assessed, to be analyzed. And really the best data that we would normally get is the total tonnage of waste, whether tons or kilograms of waste that is coming from usually the waste transfer notes from your waste contractor. We would then split that waste using the European waste codes and then see what fits where and what are the different waste streams that an organization has, so that we can afterwards evaluate whether you can actually demonstrate a reduction in absolute terms, relative terms, or whether you are perhaps moving up the waste hierarchy, which I'll come back to in a second. Most of you have heard about this waste hierarchy. There's when we analyze the numbers that an organization is submitting for an assessment, we look at, as I said, your total tonnage and whether that tonnage has been going up or down. There are three ways you can demonstrate a reduction to in terms of the Carbon Trust Standard assessment. The first is in absolute terms. We would look at your data over a specific time period, and that time period is 2 years, and we would try and see whether the total tonnage of waste has actually been reducing from 1 year to the next. If that is the case, if you show an improvement in total tonnage, you would achieve the Carbon Trust Standard by showing an absolute reduction. That reduction may be of 0.1%, it may be a 5%, 10%, it just needs to be an absolute reduction. If, however, you cannot demonstrate an absolute reduction, what we then look at is how your business is faring or is growing. Usually companies that are unable to demonstrate an absolute reduction is because they've grown quite fast. So we then compare how you have grown as an organization. So we look at an output metric, very often revenue or turnover. Sometimes if you're in the manufacturing sector, we look at, number of, let's say, widgets produced. If you're in your specific sector, we would look at numbers of staff and students, and we would compare how you have grown relative to how your waste has grown. And there you need to demonstrate that you have grown faster as an organization than your waste has. If you demonstrate this, you can achieve, again, the Carbon Trust Standard for waste. However, if neither of these two work, and often this does happen, we then look at what an organization is actually doing with its waste. It could be that your organization is sending a lot of its waste, or was sending a lot of its waste to landfill in the past 2-3 years, but has gradually moved away from that into recycling more or recovering some of that waste, even reusing some of that waste. And this is where we use this waste hierarchy that you see on this slide. We check whether you are indeed proactively implementing policies or doing things to move up this waste hierarchy. And if you demonstrate such a movement up that hierarchy, you can also achieve the Carbon Trust Standard for waste and demonstrate a reduction, if you will, in that respect. The second part of the assessment is where we actually look at the management of waste. What is it that you actually do as an organization to manage waste? And this slide gives you an overview of the type of questions that we ask each organization about what it's doing on waste. Effectively, you have to fill in a questionnaire, answer these questions. Each one of these questions is marked over 5 or 10 points. The most you can score is 100. The least you need to score to pass is 60. As you can see, there's a question on policy, there's a question on responsibility, who holds ultimate responsibility for waste. It can be the environment manager, for instance, the sustainability manager, the CSR manager. It could be a specific waste manager. Very often there is this specific role. We also look at how you monitor and record your data. Do you do it through spreadsheets? Do you have a specific system? Do you have sustainability software, etc.? We also look at your targets. We look at whether you're considering the different impacts of the waste that you're generating as well, and how you're procuring the waste management company as well. So what sort of things are you taking into consideration when you speak to the likes of CETA, BIFA, Veolia, etc.? There is an important aspect to all assessments, and that is that we do a site visit. We want to actually see what you do as an organization to manage waste, or to manage carbon or water. So we would choose one of your sites where we would visit you and talk to yourself, some of your staff, to get a better understanding of how waste is managed on the ground. What is it that you actually do? Are people aware of all the different initiatives that you have for waste reduction, etc.? And your organization is scored on that site visit. Bear in mind everything that I've just said is important, but this is an assessment. It isn't an audit. It really looks at what your organization is doing well. So it is a chance for each organization to demonstrate the good things that they have been doing in the past. I often say this is your chance to boast about the good things you're doing, to tell the world. Very often, you have a waste management team or an environmental team that is doing a lot of good things, but people do not know about it. This is a chance to demonstrate that, not only to us, but also to internal staff, to different internal stakeholders, but also external ones. This slide just summarizes once again what sort of reductions you can look to achieve. As I said before, you need to demonstrate a greater than 0% reduction in absolute terms, an improvement relative to an output metric that needs to exceed 1.4%, and also an improvement up the waste hierarchy as well. So, coming on to the benefits of certification. So, I will mention a few of these, but please bear in mind that those differ for every organization. We often have, companies that come to us simply because they want to work with the Carbon Trust. They want the Carbon Trust Standard logo on their website. They want a mark of achievement. Others that come to us because they want to go through what is often a difficult assessment just to benchmark where they actually stand. Maybe they want us to identify areas where they're not doing well so they can improve. Others look at just regulatory compliance. So the Carbon Trust Standard, for instance, is recognized under business in the community, so they want to get a higher score there. That they would come to us under the Carbon Disclosure Project as well. It really does depend. And others simply because they want the team to feel more involved. They want to demonstrate to the team that what they've been pushing people to do over the last few years has given great results, and they can get recognition for that. You can also save costs through this certification. That often comes after the actual assessment, because you will identify areas where you're doing exceptionally well and areas where you're not doing so well. And if you implement the changes that we do advise you to do, you often save quite high costs as well. A few more details on these different benefits. These slides will be available. I'm happy to send them over to all of you afterwards, so you can have a read at your own time. But it really is about what is it that you're trying to achieve. Are you looking to deliver efficiencies? Are you looking for a reputational benefit? Are you looking just to comply with regulations? All of these things are met by the Carbon Trust Standard for waste, and we can help you promote these achievements or help you meet the different sort of criteria that you're looking to meet and get the best benefit out of this certification. Finally, this is just a list of some of the organizations that we work with. A lot of these companies that you see on that list are current standard bearers for the Carbon Trust Standard for waste. Some are standard bearers for carbon, others are standard bearers for all three. We do have over 700 organizations that are standard bearers in one way or another. The one thing I will mention, all of our Carbon Trust standards, you can apply them to different boundaries of your organization. You can get certified to the Carbon Trust Standard for waste for your head office, for a specific division, for a specific school if you want within a university, or for your entire organization. You can do this internationally as well, and the best thing about the Carbon Trust Standard is that although it started off in the UK, it is becoming more and more recognized internationally too. So very often universities have actually used this to sometimes recruit students, so talk about their environmental credentials. And in a world where the young generation is becoming more and more environmentally savvy, these type of things start to become more important. Finally, just a few very short case studies of the first organizations that achieved the Carbon Trust Standard for waste. We always, as we develop the methodology, ask for organizations to come and participate in what we call a Pathfinder program, where they can test the methodology with us, tweak it a little bit, so that we can, test around with actual organizations. And the three that I'm about to show you are sort of the first three of the first five that achieved the Carbon Trust Standard for waste back in January. And then at the end, you will hear also from the first college to achieve the Carbon Trust waste standard. As you see on this slide, Whitbread was one of the first standard bearers for the Carbon Trust Standard for waste. This is, you probably know them best by their Premier Inn hotels spread around the country and Europe. Quite a large organization with a lot of employees. They achieved the Carbon Trust Standard for waste, showing a 4.5% absolute reduction in waste across all hotels and restaurants. And the interesting bits about their assessment and their certification, first, they demonstrated that up until that moment they were diverting 93% of their waste from landfill, and are planning to divert 100% of their waste from landfill by 2017. A few examples of the type of things that they demonstrated during the qualitative assessments is how they actually sort waste, food waste and recyclable materials on site. They do this on site rather than elsewhere. How they're educating their staff or creating waste champions, if you will, among the staff so that they can spread the word about the different initiatives that they're doing on waste. What is it that they're doing on recycling, different recycling fixtures and fittings that they are fitting within the different hotels. And finally, an interesting story about how they actually manage food waste and what happens to it and how it is sensed for anaerobic digestion. The second example is PricewaterhouseCoopers, referred to more often as PwC. They also achieved a standard showing an absolute reduction, this time of 9%, again for all of their UK operations. They already send zero waste to landfill and have a target of reducing absolute waste by 50% by 2017, which is quite a challenging target, but they are already on track to delivering that. The interesting bit of one of the interesting stories that they told the assessor was the initiative, which can seem quite easy to implement, but is often difficult in this type of environment, is the removal of their desk bins, reluctantly done by a lot of their staff, but ultimately something that was achieved and actually helped them reduce their waste significantly. Finally, a company in the manufacturing sector, Renishaw PLC, a little less known probably to most of you. The reason I put this example there is because this company actually achieved the waste standard by demonstrating a movement up the waste hierarchy. So their overall tonnage of waste wasn't necessarily going down, but they were recycling more, sending a lot less to landfill, sometimes even avoiding waste, which is something that we're really trying to encourage all of our standard bearers to do. I'd like to stop there and actually turn it over to Rick Bedson from Coleg Cambria to tell you a little bit more then about their experience with the Carbon Trust Standard and certification to the waste standard.
Good afternoon from Coleg Cambria. I'm Rick Bedson. I'm actually Head of Estates for Coleg Cambria, and I'm joined this afternoon by two of my colleagues, Nikki Shuttleworth, who's the Sustainability Officer, dealing mainly with the data and gathering the data together, and Tina, who is actually a sustainability technician who works on one of the campuses and actually implements things and actually measures things on the ground. So there's the three sort of people involved at the three different levels, which actually allow us to respond to any questions that anybody may have. Coleg Cambria itself, as an introduction, we're a further education college based in North East Wales. The size of the college, as you can see, we've got about 1,600 staff, 27,000 students, and we cover a full range of courses. The college actually operates over 6 sites, and to give you some idea of the sort of spectrum, we have urban-based colleges, which include a full-size European sports stadium, rural-based colleges with animal centres and rare breed centres, and an agricultural college with a working farm. So that'll give you some idea of the scope of Coleg Cambria and the size of the organisation. Reasons for certification. About early 2014, we looked at our waste management, which we were actually managing and we thought very well. Our problem was when we actually analysed what we thought we were doing very well, is we had no way of actually confirming it. We didn't know whether we were doing good or bad. We had no measures to actually work against. We did have an exchange of from other colleges within the FE sector, so we had some sort of idea, but it was only an idea. What we needed was something structured that we can measure ourselves against. We could also do with a fresh look at what we were doing. Complacent is possibly the wrong word, but we were very familiar and satisfied with what we were doing. And we thought like a review or a fresh approach may actually be warranted, and we would benefit from it. We would like to actually do that, do the review to actually see what we could do better, and also to recognise the work that was also being done. We were already actually managing a waste, like I said before, we thought remarkably well, If we were, it'd be good to actually have that work recognised. And like all public bodies, we were looking at the opportunities for further savings. So that was the background of the reasons. We went to the marketplace to actually try and find something that we could measure ourselves against. And after a period of time of studying a number of options, we discovered the carbon trust and the waste certification being the only one which actually offered the rigour and the criteria that we were looking for. Working with the carbon trust, the first thing we actually did was review the information, the data that we already had available. It was very thorough, we thought complete. However, during the review, we identified shortfalls. So what we was assuming we had complete and we were quite satisfied with, in fact, did have some shortfalls when studied and analysed carefully. A review of our current policies and procedures. We reviewed them in the process. And once again, as a result, when I get to the end of the presentation, I'll actually indicate to you how we've actually changed our complete approach to our waste management process. But we reviewed then like our policies and procedures. We established how the data needed to be presented to meet the accreditation standard. Now that was a bit of a difficulty. We were actually measuring in one way to meet a number of standards. One was the Green Dragon that we have in Wales. But it did actually mean a complete change of how we gathered, not so much how we gathered, but how we collated and presented the data. And provide a target and generate the fresh challenge and the interest. So that was all working with the Carbon Trust initially. Action taken. As a result of looking at the data, we identified the shortfalls, as I was saying. We then amended the data gathering and the presentation. We confirmed the amounts and categories of waste when it was considered against the waste hierarchy. Although we was actually already separating the waste and actually accounted for it in separate streams, that separation was based on categories that may not have been as accurate as they should have been. So this process allowed us to be more accurate with our description of wastes. We improved the reporting and accuracy of measuring various waste streams. Once again, we were already doing it, but not necessarily as, well, we weren't doing it as accurate as it should have been. Improves the understanding of waste hierarchy and disposal routes used by waste contractors. As a result of this process, we established a better understanding of their waste contractor, exactly what their procedures were for the disposal of a full range of waste. And we actually rationalised the EAUC codes. When we looked at it and analysed it, we actually found we have several very similar on the same waste. So once again, the process was actually very beneficial. The outcomes. We improved the accuracy of the overall waste data. We simplified. If you recall, I actually mentioned about changing from what we had to meet the carbon standard. In the process, we actually realised that it was a much simpler system, much simpler display, and easier to work with. A change in the college's approach. Where before I actually mentioned we looked at our policies and procedures and looked at them carefully, as a result of the process, we have changed our approach. Up until then, we had been not solely focused on recycling, but we had put a great deal of effort into recycling. We've educated students into recycling. We had a number of recycling programs. We even paid the Student Association for recycling plastic through a waste pays initiative. But as a result of this process, we consider that recycling may not be our top priority, or it would be beneficial for us to change to look at waste reduction. That's where the changes come. So we've now subtly changed to waste reduction and not such the emphasis on recycling. We raised the profile of waste management in the process and better understanding of the hierarchy, not within the waste management team, but across the college with managers and students. And that's part of the next point where we increase participation in the scheme. The whole involvement of managers at all levels, as well as students, all become involved to increase participation and they actually received a better understanding of the processes. As a process of working with the contractors and refocusing our waste and reduction, we then identified a number of areas where for potential savings can be made. These are now currently being made. And we was able to actually supply recognition for the staff that were managing the process prior to us working with the Carbon Trust, during the process of working with the Carbon Trust, and receiving this accreditation. The increase in profile, the increase in participation, and that additional recognition encouraged us to support and allowed us to acquire the support that was required for further initiatives to take forward like within the world of sustainability. Our way forward. As I said before, we are actually moving away from recycling. We won't leave it completely. We will still keep the systems in place, but our focus will subtly change to waste reduction. So we're now working with departments and suppliers to look at waste in areas where we can actually reduce that waste coming into the college in the first place. Working with the Carbon Trust, we intend actually now going for the Carbon Trust Water and the carbon standard, working on the understanding, as it was mentioned earlier, the triple standard is something that we're seriously considering we start working towards in stages. Just to give you an idea of what we were doing, 2012-2013, once again, I remind you that our focus was actually on recycling. Our overall waste tonnage generated was the 887, and of that we recycled like 791. The following year, which, if you remember, Lasal was referring to 2 years. These are the 2 years that we actually presented. Once again, a reduction like to 820, of which we recycled 753. Up until now, we've actually been managing our waste, reducing our waste, and we think all of the big hits and the easy ones have been achieved. But we do want to actually move the focus to waste reduction, so therefore we set ourselves a target of 780 tonnes for this next academic year. A demanding target, but now we've actually got the waste management systems in place and we've reduced as much as we can. Achieving this further reduction may actually be a more challenging process. That concludes the presentation from Coleg Cambria. Once again, there's 3 of us here at the 3 different levels of involvement within the process. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rick, and thank you, Lazar, as well. Just to echo what Rick did just say, if anybody does have any questions, this is now your opportunity. We've got 20 minutes or so left of today's webinar. If you would like to either ask them, you can unmute yourself and ask them aloud and develop a little bit of a conversation, or you can actually post them in the chat box. If you could just spend the next couple of minutes doing that, and hopefully we'll have a few questions, have some good dialogue. Brilliant. So I've got a question that has come in here from Heather at Aberystwyth. Hi, Heather. She's asking whether did Coleg Cambria include their farm in their waste reduction targets, and if so, what aspects did you include?
Yes, we did include. We had an exclusion on the sewerage and on the farm waste, farm manure.
The farm slurry was managed separately, although we quantify it like it wasn't within this scheme. The slurry we actually take from the farm. It goes through a separator. The slurry then acts as liquid fertilizer. Once it goes through the separator, the proportion of solids which is taken out is dried. That is in turn used for bedding and then solid fertilizer. So the whole process is actually a reuse actually on the slurry side. Areas that did come off the farm that were actually included were plastics and general waste from the farm, but the slurry side certainly wasn't. That was looked at as reused and treated separately. Does that answer the question, Heather?
I think hopefully that does answer the question for Heather. It says yes, thank you. We've had another question come in here. Has this been implemented at any NHS trust or other hospitals? So Lazar, I think that's a question for you.
Yes, it has. I do not believe I can mention the names of the 3 NHS trusts that have it, but 2 of those are here in the London area, and there is one up north. I think is around the Manchester or
Lovely. I think
Manchester or Derby. Yes, it has been implemented, and it does include clinical waste, all the different types of waste as well.
Brilliant, thank you. I think hopefully that answers that question. I haven't had any more questions come in. I don't know whether our speakers have today, but as I said, this is the opportunity for you guys to ask any questions live. If you do suddenly think of one later on that you wish you'd asked, that's no problem. You can either drop me an email. I will be emailing you later, so you can reply to that. And I can act as a middleman and connect you guys with today's speakers, and you can ask any questions. But really, this is a great opportunity now. So we'll give you a couple more minutes, but I appreciate that everyone needs to get back to their day. So if we do need to end a little bit early, that's no problem. Okay, I think we've given that just long enough. I just wanted to check. Oh, wait, there we go. There's a question's come in now. I've got a question here asking if anyone can explain how PwC managed to reduce paper waste by removing desktop printers and using central printers instead.
Okay, I'll try that because I spoke. We actually had an event with PwC where they explained it. It actually turned out to be the most interesting bit of the event, how you actually remove desk bins from C-level executives' desks and their PAs. How they managed to reduce it, it's quite simple. When there isn't a printer next to you, and when you have to walk about 50 yards to the nearest printer, a lot of people prefer not to print. I'm guessing maybe it's a bit of a question of laziness. It's a mindset. When you don't have a desk bin next to you, you tend to keep try to first of all reduce the amount of trips that you take to the nearest bin, and then maybe think about just putting things together next to you a little bit more. The printing side is absolutely that. It is the avoidance of the need to go print, and a lot of people would prefer not to print something that is not that important, rather than get up and go to the nearest printer to print that off. I think they really had a lot of time they spent a lot of time on behavioral change within that organization. We also work with another one of their competitors, and they implemented the exact same thing, and it has also reduced a lot of their printing as well. People tend to not want to go and print when they don't necessarily have to, when the importance is not very documented. What they also implemented is double-sided printing. Well, something actually that we do here at the Carbon Trust. We tend to print 4 pages on one piece of paper As long as it's legible, it does actually reduce the amount of paper used by a huge amount.
I can actually add one little point to that. We too have actually removed bins from offices and desks. We've set up recycling points or waste management points within corridors. We've actually found that people that do actually want to throw waste away or actually move it, that little walk from the desk to where they've been, they actually think about which recycling bin it best fits in. So instead of throwing it all into one bin and giving yourself a separation problem, reducing your recycling bins and actually allowing them to walk does encourage them to give it a bit more thought, and they do actually tend to take the time and effort to actually put it into the right recycling stream. And the encouraging point is that also goes for students, which is incredible.
That's an interesting point, actually, Rick. We have, I didn't mention this, but every year we have a Standard Bearers event where all of our Standard Bearers are invited to. It's a networking event, but also there's some case studies there. And there was 2 universities that were Standard Bearers. One was for carbon, one was for water. They were discussing exactly that a lot of the newest initiatives about the environment often come from their students. They're very proactive in this area. So I'm actually very interested to hear that this is also the fact with Coleg Cambria.
We have another initiative that may actually be worth sharing with others within the education sector, in particular involving students. We have to actually fund the student association that carries various activities with the student association across the student body, outings, etc. What we've actually, to involve that particular group, we've actually introduced a waste pay scheme where we measure the amount of plastic that goes into the recycling system. We measure that, and we currently pay £1.50 per metre cubed of plastic taken away from the site by a separate contractor. So we can account for the plastic, we can account for how much it was, and then we pay them from the waste budget, the £1.50 to the student association. What we've found over the years that's been introduced is that that's developed peer pressure. We now actually have students encouraging other students to put plastic into the right stream, simply because they know they get a tangible reward at the end of it. We've actually found that tangible reward, that payment into the waste, the payment into the student body or the student association, has encouraged that peer pressure and that development. From there, we hope to actually see, when a student has been with us 3 years, that becomes habit forming. So once again, this behavioural approach is vitally important. But to start it, it does need some tangible driver to get the student fully involved.
That's an excellent example. I think I'll use that, if I may, Rick.
Yeah, feel free.
Brilliant, thank you guys for that. I'm pretty sure that answers that question and expands a lot more on it. I haven't had any other questions come in, and I think there's quite a few people that have logged out now. So if that's okay with everyone, I think we'll call it a day today.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Brilliant.
For attending.
So,
Thanks very much. Cheerio from Coleg Cambria.
thank you guys.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.